So it's been a long time since I've done a video based on my DIY pond that I made. If you've seen a previous video of mine, I made a pond out of things I found at work, and I just wanted to do an update on that really. It's been all over winter and I haven't done one. So just before winter, just before the cold set in, this was last December really, I got myself a couple of new fish. You may have seen them in another video I did, which is about my top 10 fancy goldfish for ponds. But this fish here is a jikin, and I got it from Star Fisheries. Hasn't got the normal 12-point kind of red markings on it, but I just really liked the uniqueness of the pattern. So it's only a baby, just a juvenile at the moment. I got myself that nice little jikin. You can see it's got a peacock tail, and yeah, it was really about those markings. I actually saw this, to be honest, on a Fancy Goldfish Fanatics video. I saw him go and do a tour of Star Fisheries. I haven't been there for a while, and I just saw that. Oh, and that's me trying to get my London shabumpkin out of the bag, and as you can see, it's a bit fast, so I did drop that. So yeah, I mean, the fish were all ticking along nicely. When I added that little jikin, it did sort of wonder where it was to begin with. I think the flow was quite strong. You can see it there, sort of. It found a little corner eventually, and now is swimming around as normal. But you can see, compared to the size of my other fish, and over Christmas, I mean, the pond kind of went into a bit of a state where we didn't do much, and I did some fishing, did some sea fishing. Got a little bass, you can see on there. Got a sea bass, which was nice. And really, the pond started to go into a state where I didn't really need to do much to it. But I did have this issue with a lot of leaves falling on the netting, as you can see there. And they would sort of weigh down the netting to the point where, well, the leaves would then go in the water, and it just wasn't ideal really. And I knew that all those leaves were going to drop at some point. So this was just before Christmas, this, and you can see there, those leaves definitely are going to drop at some point. So what I did, I spoke to Gary Hayter, who's someone who helped me out with some videos before in the past, and he gave me some advice saying that he uses greenhouse netting, which is kind of supposed to let some light through, but it's really, really fine. So I went and got some of that. I think it was about 30% shade or 30% UV, it's called. Got rid of all the leaves I could, and then used this meshing over the top, really thin. So I kind of knew I wasn't going to have to access the pond for a while. So this isn't one of those things where you can take it on and off. Well, I could do, I guess, but that wasn't the idea. The idea was just to stop. And you can see already, a minute after installing it, it's working. The leaves are not going in. So that was a way for me to basically cut down on the amount of organics that were going to fall in the pond, start rotting. I like to do a big water change as well, so before I'm going to leave the pond for a while. So that's something I always do for many of them going on holiday with tanks and stuff. To be honest, this is my first pond that I've had, so it's something that I feel like is a good habit to get into, I'd imagine. And just while I'm doing that, I'm checking out the fish. This is in the indoor in-shed pond now. Just checking out these ranchu, making sure they're all good, and they seem like they're still quite active now in December. I hadn't slowed down as much as they do later on. But there we go, the netting was on, and I'd advise, if you wanted to do this, just stop the leaves going in. It's something that I thought would really be helpful. I didn't do it last year. This is the second winter I've had this pond. And this, now you can see, moving into the indoor shed pond, which I've also got another video on how I built out of pallets. Bit of a mess at the moment in that shed. But basically I wanted to make a pond that was as cheap as possible, so I used pallets and offcuts of wood. So, I'd left the pond for a while, and now and again I did do a few water changes. I've got this Cockney Koi Mega Box filter running, and I wanted to make sure the fish were all good, so I did do some water changes. You can see some of the fish have got some methylene blue on them there, because I noticed a sore on the side of one of them, which I have treated before successfully with the methylene blue. So I just thought I'd give it a go again. It wasn't anything major, but you can see just on the back of that fish there, we had some what looked like a sore. Maybe I was wrong thinking that, and I just sort of wanted to cover my back and treat it. But they're all looking quite nice. The very bright reds, my top view ranchu, and as you can see, I spilt the methylene blue all over my hand and all over the wood, that's never going to come off. So maybe I cap this in the future with some better wood. But yeah, time's ticking on. Most of the leaves have fallen now, although and it's doing its job. It's protecting it. All of those would have been in the pond if I hadn't put that netting on there. So it's looking good to me. The fish still quite active. I felt like they stayed active for a while compared to last year. It was a bit warmer. Maybe that was just me. I am down in the southeast of England, so potentially it's always a bit warmer here, I guess. And here we go with the top view ranchu, kind of huddled a little bit in a corner. Filter's still working on nicely. And I did actually, I've got this little light that I can always pop on and check on. This is one thing that I'm not too sure that I'm happy with about this indoor shed pond, is the fact that I've got they don't have as much natural sunlight as the fish that are outside. And the light really isn't on like if it was an aquarium. It's on when I go in and use the shed. So that's something I may think about in the future. Do I put some more windows in the shed or a skylight? I've considered all these things. You can see also the build up on the floor on the bottom of the pond, some detritus there, which every time I do a water change I suck that away. It kind of acts a little bit like a sump, that indoor shed pond, where it kind of collects that material and doesn't siphon a lot from the bottom, even though you've got a kind of pipe extending downwards. Doesn't necessarily clear that bottom. I have to do that quite manually. So I guess there's a couple of points there that if I was to make this pond again, I would potentially address. But yeah, that methylene blue, kind of I kept just noticing that, or in the way. But the fish were looking good. It's draining how I wanted it to. It's got, in terms of this, there's no scum on the surface, that kind of thing. And really it was just a case of watching the fish gradually get a little bit slower as they move down, as it moves down in temperature. We can see they're starting to slow down a little bit, but still trying to feed. Now and again I'd chuck some pellets in there, but nothing much. Another thing I like to feed now and again, well, especially, I just feel like it's good for them, for their colour, for their vitality. There's a lot of bloodworm. I need to get some bigger blister packs really, but that's something I love to feed. I don't necessarily defrost it. I just sort of chuck it in and let them gradually defrost, and then they figure it out. But yeah, a little bit of bloodworm throughout the winter, not much pellets really, a couple of pellets now and again. And then we moved on to January. Now January, not much is going on with the pond at all, so I did visit a few places, one of them being my LFS. This footage is actually used in my last video about top 10 fancy goldfish for a pond. There's something about the habuna, the common goldfish, that I just love, the way you're so hardy, and you're not going to get those problems that you sometimes get with the fancy goldfish. So if you haven't checked out that video yet, you can have a little look at that. It's on my channel. And the frost is really starting to set in now in January. You can see how it's all frosted on the side. The fish there are very, very still. The temperature has sort of suddenly dropped. So it is insulated, the pond, but I didn't ever put a cover on top. And my fish there had really entered a kind of state called torpor, I think it's called, which is kind of like hibernation. And I went over to my dad's pond actually, and I saw his koi, and they were very still, as you can see. This is a glass panel on the side of his pond, which I'll show you now. But you can see how they've entered the state, all facing the same way. Don't know if that's the direction of the flow or something, but I just thought that was a really interesting shot. Mine hadn't quite got to that stage yet, but these guys had slowed down, and yeah, so that's torpor, I believe it's called. That's kind of state of hibernation. Now, as there's not much to do with the pond, I did try and keep myself busy with other things. If you don't like spiders, look away. But we went to a kind of tarantula show, I guess it was called, bug convention, and it's something I'm kind of interested in as well. Not as much as the fancy goldfish, but I used to keep a few things, and dart frogs, that kind of thing. So I like the DIY side of it. We've got a little jumping spider there, which seems to be quite popular at the moment. But yeah, I like the DIY side of these kind of hobbies. So I thought, keeping myself busy when I can't do stuff to do with the pond So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I mean, there's just some footage here for you, really. Not fancy goldfish related, but I thought I'd chuck it in there. And one thing that really did pull my attention was all these different ants, which I thought looked pretty interesting. And it's something that I might consider one day, have a little ant farm. But yeah, it was a massive convention, to be honest with you, to the point where, you know, it was lots of busy, quite a big hall, very busy. You know, we even had someone dressed as an ant at some point, which was interesting to see. But yeah, that's just thought I'd include that little bit of footage there. I did come home with a praying mantis, so I'll just say that as well. Okay, so February time now. I'm hoping things would start to warm up a little bit. And the fish, now and again, did seem a bit active, so I tried to feed them. Some of the things I fed them was bloodworm again, pellets. We've got some freeze-dried tubiflex, I believe it is. But I think I ended up fishing some of that out, to be honest with you, because I didn't want to overfeed. And you can see they're still quite slow. I've got that netting on actually, which is hard to show you exactly what they're like. But yeah, so I mean, I also had this little guy that had survived. I hadn't said much about him. I've got this little fry, which I do not think is going to colour up at all. It's going to stay as it is, a kind of, I guess, the kind of natural wild type coloration. But it was still eating. It was living in my living room. I was keeping an eye on it. You can see it's got a bit of a deformed extra tail. But this was my first attempt, you might have seen on the channel, at me breeding some fish. And that's something I'm going to do this summer with the fish that I've been showing you in my pond. But these ones, this was just one that accidentally ended up, you know, surviving. So I thought maybe it was about time that I let this little guy go into the pond. So that's what I decided to do. I decided it was time. It was warm enough. He would be absolutely fine. But as I was just taking the netting off, I did notice the amount of blanket weed that I've got in my pond. And I don't know if you have seen any of my videos before, but I had a massive problem with that last year. I also thought I'd take the time while I was out there just to pop this piece of featherboard back on the shed. So I cut a kind of a hole, I guess, eventually, and sorted that out. But yeah, it was time to have a look what the pond was like after being covered for a while. And I hadn't really done water changes, to be honest with you, over the winter. I don't know if people do, you can let me know. But I had just let it be, and the fish were okay. Yeah, fish are looking okay, starting to move a little bit more. But as you can see how much blanket weed there is. I mean, you might be able to see it towards the bottom of the pond. But I mean, I can try and solve that. I did use a good product last year, which I'll have another go at this year. But really, yeah, I just wanted to do, this is kind of a catch up of what's been going on. I've not really said anything about the pond for a while. The warmer weather was looking really nice, and the fish, it was really nice to see no netting on the pond, actually, to actually see the fish from an angle where they were just nice and clear. You know, I could see anything that was wrong with them. They all looked nice to me, all looked healthy. And the leaves had started to come back on the tree already, you know, after spending all that time, well, making sure they didn't fall in the pond. They're coming back again. It's going to be the same thing next year, I guess. But it was time now to release this little guy into his new home. I think at the end of the day, to be honest, the sooner we get him, he probably would have been all right all winter in the pond. But I just wanted to have the go myself. You can see that bronzy colour there. I don't think he's going to go red at all, have any interesting markings really. But unfortunately, the other one didn't survive. But this one is one that, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing how it grows really. It's just the first fish. So, got myself a new blue tub actually, which I quite like. And brought the fish over. I knew there was going to be a massive difference in temperature between the tank that was indoors and the pond that's outside. I did leave the bowl for a while, sort of floating, and you can see actually there I've got my ranchu in the outside pond. I was obviously doing some cleaning on the pond that's inside, but yeah, the little guy has survived and he's ready to go in now. So I believe he probably came from a Joaquin rather than a ranchu, but after floating him for a little bit, it was time for him to actually go inside. So popped him in, and as soon as he went in, I sort of realised that I'm probably never going to see him again, but I thought I'd take the time to clean out a bit of the algae, a bit of the blanket weed while I could. But you can see the amount that's coming out of that. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work to sort that out. That's something I can do this summer, this spring. Yeah, a lot of blanket weed there. So time to release him into the pond. And as I said before, I think he's so dark in colour. When I put him in there, I'm never going to see him again. But we'll catch up now and again, see what he's like. Try and find him. But there he goes, joining the others finally. As I got the blue bowl out, I thought it was worth just having a bit of inspection. The fish is the big female Joaquin that I've got. I've kind of almost a reverse tancho marking on their head. That's sometimes called a jade seal when you've got the white on the wen, but obviously there's not much wen on a Joaquin, or none at all really. You do get wen sometimes on a chiquin, but not on a Joaquin. But yeah, I mean, vibrant red, look really healthy. That's the female that I'm planning on breeding with this male. Absolutely love the white and the benny, the red on this fish. Absolutely beautiful, reminiscent of kohaku koi in my opinion. Really, really nice fish. So that is the male that I'm hoping to breed this spring with the female that you just saw before. But yeah, just thought I'd bowl those up to see, you know, check how they were really while I had the bowl out. So everyone's looking quite good. Now the next thing I guess is for me to try and sort out this blanket weed. So this is the stuff I used before, aqua source. It seems to be the only stuff that works for me really. So borrowed the kitchen scales in order to weigh out the right amount, checking the label, and I'm hoping it only takes 1 or 2 doses because there is a lot there. So it just says to sprinkle it in the pond. So I sprinkled it around the edges. You don't need to mix it in water or anything first. I always worry a bit about that, about the fish coming up, but apparently it's fine. And it's just a job of waiting now. It's supposed to be completely non-toxic for the wildlife, so yeah. Just drying out that net there. I'm going to put that away so I can use it again next year. And as I spoke to you about before, as I had this feather board, I thought it was worth me sort of finishing off the pond. So I just cut a little hole out of there really, and I managed to sort the pond out. So you can see as the pipes come out, it's all sorted. But there we go, there's an update on the fancy pond. Oh, my little girl did get me a little sign as well, which I thought looked nice over the pond. So yeah, there we go, there's an update. If you fancy following along, seeing how everything goes, make sure you subscribe. I've got a lot more videos on the way.